Good morning, afternoon, or evening. When I was studying for my doctorate in business administration, I became aware of a word, corporate agility, two words, I guess, corporate agility. So I just want to talk about that a little bit, how corporate agility found its way into my uh, consulting toolbox. So, my dissertation is actually titled A Structural Interpretation of Business Growth in the Fashion Apparel Industry. At its core, my research asked a practical question. What happens inside an organization as it grows? And what organizational characteristics allow that growth to continue successfully? I chose the fashion apparel industry because it provided an unusually demanding environment in which to examine this question. Apparel companies operate with short product life cycles, uncertain consumer demand, global competition, complex supply chains, rapidly changing fashion preferences, and significant pressure on both price and speed. In an environment like this, an organization cannot simply become larger. It must become more capable of adapting. So, my doctoral research extended the organizational growth theory developed by Dr. Larry Greiner, an internationally recognized consultant in organizational design and a professor at the University of Southern California, where I got my MBA. He has consulted to several Fortune 500 companies in the United States, in Europe, and South America. Greiner proposed that organizations move through stages of growth, beginning with creativity, followed by direction, delegation, coordination, and calibration. He further suggested that each period of growth eventually creates a crisis that requires the organization to change the way it is structured and managed. So, my research examined how that concept applies to the fashion apparel industry, particularly in an increasingly global and dynamic business environment. My study was guided by two primary research questions. My first was, does the structure of an organization contribute to its growth? The second was, does the decision making process facilitate organizational growth? To investigate these questions, I used an exploratory qualitative case study approach. I examined public documents from a broad range of apparel companies, including H&M, United Colors of Benetton, Inditex, American Apparel, Gap, Burberry, Polo Ralph Lauren, VF Corporation, Victoria's Secret, LVMH, Perry Ellis, and others. Total of 27 companies. My research relied on annual reports, 10K and 10Q reports, Securities and Exchange Commission filings, financial information, and other public documents. I examined profitability ratios, solvency ratios, organizational structures, leadership models, supply chains, distribution channels, information systems, financial resources, international operations, and growth patterns. I then interpreted these companies through several theoretical perspectives: organizational contingency theory, resource dependency theory, modern structural organizational theory, and organizational ecology. Triangulating these perspectives allowed me to examine growth not simply as an increase in revenue or number of stores, but as an organizational process. So, what did the research find? Well, the first major finding was that organizational structures do contribute to growth. As companies grow, their structures tend to evolve. A small entrepreneurial organization may begin with a simple structure, but as it becomes larger, it may develop functional departments, and further growth can produce divisional structures, strategic business units, holding companies, matrix structures, or other configurations. But the important conclusion is not that there is one perfect organizational structure. Rather, the structure must evolve with the organization and its environment. My analysis showed that companies capable of growth tended to possess structures that allowed them to acquire resources, enter markets, develop brands, coordinate business units, and respond to changes in their environment. And this finding enforced Greiner's model. Growth itself creates organizational problems. What works when a company was small may actually prevent it from succeeding when it becomes larger. The second major finding concerned decision making. The research showed that the distinction between centralized and decentralized organizations is not sufficient by itself to explain growth. In large organizations, some organizational decisions can occur at lower levels, while major strategic decisions remain concentrated at higher levels. So, communication mechanisms, therefore, become extremely important. In the apparel industry, especially, knowledge must move quickly. A company may have designers in one country, manufacturing facilities in another, distribution centers somewhere else, and retail operations across dozens of markets. Consumer preferences may change before a traditional hierarchy can even process the information. So my analysis therefore found that channel management and knowledge sharing are critical to effective decision making and organizational growth. Distribution centers, information technology centers, customer support functions, executive suppliers, and other participants have to exchange knowledge rapidly enough to support fast fashion decisions. This leads to what I consider one of the most important conclusions of my dissertation. Knowledge is a strategic access. I'm sorry, asset. Knowledge is a strategic asset. The companies that performed well, despite major environmental disruptions, shared characteristics such as knowledge based systems, innovation, communication, and flexibility. At the same time, excessive formulation can discourage innovation. The organization, therefore, has to develop what I described as agility, including portfolio agility, strategic agility, and operational agility. This becomes especially important when we consider organizational learning. Now, on that subject, I distinguish between closed and open organizational systems. Closed system primarily learns from what happens inside the organization. But an open system actively interacts with its environment. It gathers information from markets, customers, suppliers, governments, competitors, strategic partners, and other external stakeholders. In a global business environment, the open system has significant advantages. This business information system can interpret political, financial, cultural, and strategic changes and use that information to construct a response. In other words, the organization is not simply reacting after something happens, it is continually learning from its environment and it's adapting. That adaptability becomes particularly important internationally because companies encounter different legal systems, regulations, currencies, cultures, languages, and business practices. My research suggests that organizations with open systems and strong organizational learning capabilities are better positioned to understand these differences and develop appropriate strategic relationships. This brings the research back to Dr. Larry Greiner, my friend and mentor from the University of Southern California. Larry described organizational growth as a sequence of stages. My findings suggested that in the fast moving fashion industry, organizations may need to think about these stages less as a simple sequence, as he presented, and more as concurrent organizational processes. Creativity, direction, delegation, coordination, and collaboration may all need to occur simultaneously in different areas of a global organization. That insight led to my primary recommendation. Organizations competing globally must balance two powerful pressures. The first is the pressure to reduce costs. The second is the pressure to adapt to local markets. A purely global strategy can achieve efficiency by concentrating production and decision making. A highly localized strategy can achieve responsiveness through decentralization, but the most sophisticated organization attempts to achieve both. This is what I call a transnational organization. My recommendation is that organizations support this transnational model through technology, knowledge management, organizational learning, and integrated business processes. Technologies such as computer aided design, computer aided manufacturing, point of sale systems, electronic data exchange, and enterprise information systems can connect information across the value chain. This ultimately led me to propose a knowledge based business model. In that model, knowledge is not simply information stored somewhere in the company. It becomes an organizational resource that connects business planning, finance, product planning, materials, production, sales, distribution, accounting, and human resources. Subject matter experts and key stakeholders collaborate across these functions so that information becomes useful organizational knowledge. So, the model in my dissertation captures the practical result of that process. Knowledge contributes to business value through lower cost, improved responsiveness, increased productivity, new products and services, increased market share, improved use of resources, and increased profits. So, if I were to summarize a dissertation in one central idea, it would be this: sustainable growth is not simply the result of becoming larger, it is a result of becoming more adaptive. Organizations grow successfully when their structures, decision making processes, resources, technology, and knowledge systems evolve together. Structure matters, decision making matters, but neither operates independently. The strongest organizations are learning systems. They continually gather knowledge, distribute that knowledge across organizational boundaries, and then modify their structures and decisions in response to changing conditions. That conclusion is particularly visible in fashion apparel because the industry moves so quickly. But the broader implication extends well beyond fashion. In a dynamic global environment, the competitive organization is not necessarily the organization with the most resources or the most elaborate hierarchy. It is the organization that can learn, coordinate, collaborate, and adapt faster than its environment changes. And that is a central contribution of my research. Thank you very much for listening. I am Dr. Brandon Hamilton.